Welcome to week 2. During this week, we'll be talking about all the attempts scholars, philosophers, and people overall made to explain popular culture. And we'll talk about the relationship between mass media and culture and all the theoretical approaches to trying to understand that relationship better. Moving on to the next slide. Well, first of all, why do we need the theories to explain culture? Why would all of a sudden people create a lot of theories if they're not related to reality, right? Well, the thing is that they are related to reality, and multiple questions that we think about on a daily basis, or sometimes we see some cultural phenomenon and we can't explain it. That's exactly why cultural theories were created, trying to explain those things that originated in the human society through culture. So, for example, questions like why pop culture is popular. All those theories and scientific advancements do sound very far away from reality until you really apply them to that reality and compare. I'm sure sometimes you've seen some phenomenon that people saw on television, like reality shows, for example, and you were probably wondering, how is that popular? Why people like to watch it? How is that popular among millions of viewers around the world? Well, that's one of the questions that those theories try to explain. Or questions like, does violence in video games lead to violence in real life? There's been a lot of conversation about that among parents, among schools. Mass media used to cover that topic pretty frequently 10 or 20 years ago. And a quick hint, the research has found that it does not, but how do we know that, right? Without research, we won't. Or questions like why some phenomena become popular and others don't. Why something we invent or create, like a TV show, becomes a worldwide phenomenon and other things go unnoticed by the general public. That can also be explained by theories and research. Or questions or the question of how it's related to the idea of mass consumerism. Those things are also worth exploring because they really help us expand our knowledge not only of human culture but also of human society. Questions like, what are the cultural roots of modern trends? I'm sure you've seen a lot of connections between modern culture and what modern artists or musicians are doing and our historical roots. So let's say some of the traditional cultures and their elements, you can see them in music. Or some of the traditional painting techniques, you can still see them being implemented by modern artists. So a lot of those questions are answered through theories, or at least it's one of the attempts for the humanity to understand itself through culture and through knowledge. Or essentially the question of how we should interpret culture. What is it? Why human beings as a species are so inclined to create, to comprehend the world around themselves through culture? And why is it so typical for Homo sapiens and not other species? So scientists and theorists were trying to explain that for pretty much centuries. And there's so many different directions here when we talk about different directions of thought. Let's take an overview of all of them, and this week, that's exactly what we're going to devote our time to. Moving on to the next slide. Let's start by categorizing all those theories. So obviously, there's multiple theories, multiple ways we can explain the relationship between the human society and culture. To make it a little bit more understandable, a little bit more easy to approach, we can group all those theories into several categories. And the largest categories we'll be talking about this week are communication models, critical theories, psychological and sociological theories, semiotic theories, and transgression theories. So let's define what they are, who were the major names working in each direction, and what were their major theoretical advancements that helped us understand what's happening in the world of culture a little bit better. Moving on to the next slide. We'll start with communication models and theories. Let's talk about 3 of them today, just to sort of take a look at what was going on there. Some of them are pretty old, so it's not that relevant for current research and for current understanding of theory, but it really created the foundation of how we see this relationship between culture and the human society. So the first one of the earliest attempts was the bullseye model, and we'll talk about that today. The other one was the SMCR model, which is also pretty old, and the agenda setting theory, which is widely applied across the field in mass communication, and it's actually still pretty relevant and pretty popular. Moving on to the next slide. Before we do, let's mention one of the key scholars in the field that contributed a lot to how modern scholars see and understand the effect media have on people and the world of culture. Marshall McLuhan, a Canadian philosopher, contributed a great deal to our modern understanding of that. He was influenced by the critics of consumerist culture, and we'll talk a little bit more about who those people were, and highlighted the heterogeneous and disconnected structure of modern societies and their commodity-based worldview. Basically, what this means is that he highlighted that the overall structure of modern society pretty much looks like patchwork. There's a lot of disconnectivity here, and there's a lot of heterogeneity, or in other words, a lot of differences. Another thing that McLuhan highlighted often in his work is the commodity-based worldview, which applied to culture means that very often, and I'm sure you can see that in the world of pop culture, culture is being turned into a good for sale. So let's say when we create a film, oftentimes we have to think first about whether it's going to be a commercial success and adapt artistic tools toward it. Of course, we have independent movies, we have art house, but if we talk about the vast majority of all the production that's going on, we can't say that it's completely disconnected from the market forces, and that's exactly what McLuhan highlighted. Moving on to the next one. What were McLuhan's major ideas? He had a lot of them, but we'll cover some of his most famous terms and thoughts and theories. Well, first of all, he wrote a lot about the relationship between technology and humans, and he saw technology as a human attempt to enhance our biological capabilities. So basically, it means that technology is just a tool for us to extend what's within our reach, physically and in cultural terms as well, and pretty much in all terms and ideas possible. So let's say we can't walk very fast, or we can't run 100 miles in an hour. But if you have a car, that becomes more attainable, right? If you have a plane, you can go even faster. You can move around the world even faster. So you don't have to rely on your biological capabilities of overcoming the distances. It's just not a problem for you anymore as a species. Same thing with mass media, let's say. We have the capability to transmit the message to the receiver. If you want to say something to one person, you just say that directly, right? But what if you want to transmit the message to millions of people that live anywhere in the world, in Brazil, in Australia, in Russia, in India? What if you want billions of people to hear your message? You use technology to overextend your biological capabilities. And that's how McLuhan saw technology. Another term that he coined was the global village. And that's the term that he used to describe the phenomenon of the world becoming more interconnected as the result of the propagation of media technologies throughout the world. So as you can see, again, a lot of McLuhan's ideas were concentrated about using technology to overextend or extend our biological capabilities, or to serve a certain purpose in the society. So the term global village refers to this increased interconnectivity between people in the modern age. Sounds pretty regular for us now, right? You can follow any famous person or celebrity or politician on Twitter and know what they think or what they wrote. You can follow someone on Instagram and know what they're doing every day through their Instagram stories. Well, now think about this. McLuhan wrote those words decades ago, when there was no internet widely available to the population, and when people would never even imagine that things like Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram will become our everyday reality. So pretty much he predicted all that surrounds us now in our everyday life. And that's why his views were, in a way, so predictive, and they were also sort of ahead of his time, because a lot of his ideas about the role of computers and technology and machines and its effect on people and culture were way ahead of time back then when those words were written. And we'll talk more about this week. One quote that you can see quoted very often when someone writes about McLuhan his quote, "The medium is the message." And that's, again, one of his most famous, his most popular ideas, commonly quoted by other scholars, that refers to the idea that essentially technology starts dictating what the message is. So one example that's really easy to understand for modern people is how the form of social media that we choose to transmit the message changes our message itself. So think about it. 20 years ago, people had no idea that we will have an app called TikTok, where people post funny videos of them dancing or doing some things that don't really make much sense, but they're fun to watch. And now think about the person living in the 21st century right now. For us, this form of message totally makes sense. So you watch a TikTok video, and it can be a joke, and this joke can be politically charged, or it can have a certain message in it, and you'll understand it because the medium itself dictated the message, the form of the message. Same with, let's say, memes. Memes wouldn't really make much sense in the 80s, right? You can't just print out funny pictures with short captions that make people laugh, but they also kind of have a meaning, and just give them out. It doesn't make any sense for a person living in the 80s. But for now, with technological tools that we have, a meme is actually a very logical way to transmit a message in the most efficient way possible. So sometimes instead of writing a long post about how you feel, you just post a meme. Instead of answering to your opponent that you disagree with on Facebook, you just send them a meme. And that's pretty much your whole message, right? So in this sense, the medium is the message. Because without the medium, without internet connection, social media, and this GIF app that you have embedded in Facebook, it wouldn't make sense. You wouldn't create a meme on your own, print it out, and send it to your opponent, right? So the medium actually dictates what the message will look like, and sometimes not the other way around. And now think about it. McLuhan wrote it when people didn't really use computers in their daily life that much. There were no memes, no TikTok, no Facebook, no social media. So how would he know that this will become our reality? And that's probably one of the reasons why his ideas are so popular, because they were way ahead of time. And another idea that McLuhan expressed in his works is that each cultural period can be defined based on technological discoveries made during that time. So pretty much overall, the way human culture evolved, if we talk about literature, the history of film, the history of mass media, newspapers, radio stations, the history of art, depended largely on what technological discoveries were made during that period of time. Think about the history of photography and how it started. It just would be impossible without technological advancements, right? Think about how now a lot of professional photographers create photos with their iPhones, and it's pretty much like a whole movement in art. Again, technological discoveries made it possible. If an iPhone didn't have a camera good enough to create photos of that quality, this whole movement just would not exist, which sends us back to the idea that the medium is the message, and technological advancements are at the very core of every cultural revolution that we go through as a society. And that was also one of McLuhan's ideas. All right,